because AI is constantly evolving, we can't have the 6 month, year and a half review period, because then we are slowing the business down. We have to make a decision quickly.
David Farr is the Director of Engineering Corporate IT Platforms at VanCity. He has over 25 years of experience working in IT of all sizes, including Sun Life, Manulife, and OpenText.
In terms of adopting an AI tool, what is the biggest mistake you have seen a company make?
If your data isn't good, if your data isn't available, if your data is not well secured, then the usefulness becomes less great. And I find that POC, the adoption doesn't take off.
Hi everyone. Today we are joined by David Farr. He's the Director of Engineering Corporate ID Platforms at VanCity. And today we'll talk to him about what IT needs to prepare for when every single employee in the enterprise starts getting access to AI and what's next. To start, David, why don't we begin by talking a bit about the AI wave that's going through enterprises right now. What kind of conversations are you seeing in IT leadership circles about giving your end users and employees access to AI tools?
It's a great question. I'll caveat that this is my opinions and my opinions alone for this podcast. They may or may not be shared by any of my current or former employers. With that disclaimer, I would just say that what we're seeing with IT leaders and with leaders in general is they're looking at the trade-off between the productivity that we hope to gain in improvements and boosts and new features and capabilities that AI would provide us with versus possibly the trade-offs as far as there's chances of security and privacy breaches and things like that. So it's a bit of a 1-2, or looking at how it can help internal employees. That's probably the focus of this call, but also how it can help customers. Say they come to your website or they use your mobile application. So we're sort of looking at it from both perspectives. What are the pros and the cons? Then cost is also another factor. Generally, generative AI, especially for companies, is not free. I mean, it requires a lot of cloud computing and so on and so forth to make it work. So they're looking for the return on investment. The return on investment will probably get better each year in my experience because AI can do more. It started basically as interactive, giving you information, you give it information back and forth. Now it's starting to be able to do some things for you, can actually do some automation, and I predict that'll grow. It'll move into other areas and so on and so forth. So I'm not saying that somebody should or shouldn't get in on the wave right now, but you're probably going to see an increased return on investment as it starts to add more features over time.
And that's very interesting because when you talk about ROIs, the first thing enterprises do is usually they run some sort of POC, right, before they go fully on board with the softwares. But while talking to customers, what we have seen is, they have started a lot of POCs, but most of them didn't end up converting to like a full-time usage in terms of product. Do you see the same?
Yes, I do.
And why is that? Yeah, I'm curious.
That's a great question. A quote I've heard is change is always slower than you expect and bigger. So if you look at, for example, how we got to the point of having AI, the enablers of it, computing kind of became what we would picture today in the 60s and 70s. In the 1980s, we got personal computers. You could actually have a computer in your home. Certainly in the 90s, in the mid 90s and on, we had the internet as a massive revolution enabler to so many things. Mobile computing in the 2000s, cloud computing in the 2010s, machine language and LLM in the early 2020s. That's what brought us all here. And each of those has created its own sets of effects and ripples. And so if I use the biggest example, probably the internet, when we started using that back in the mid 1990s, like we're looking at websites, we didn't picture it would replace some of the things it did today. For example, we would go and get in a car or walk to the store and we would rent or buy a movie on an optical disc or a VHS tape. We'd come home and we'd watch that, right? Now that's antiquated and silly thinking now, 20, 30 years later. You stream your videos, right? You do that. Well, AI is going to start doing that too. What I'm finding with a lot of the POCs is the people who are in it are often very passionate about it. There are people like myself and we do great stuff. But how does it translate into the broader context? Not everybody may be passionate about AI. They're busy with their job. They've got 1,000 things on their mind and so on and so forth. And that's true, I've seen with Innovation Lab. I've seen it with POCs in general. It's not just AI. It's how do you take those learnings and make it exciting and useful for people. When I don't have to get out of my house to get a movie, that's exciting and useful for me. Maybe in the mid 1990s, a lot of people are like, I go to a website, it's got text and a couple pictures, so what, right? So as time evolves, I think the values of AI will become increasingly obvious to people, and I think the POCs will become increasingly to the needs of the broader audience. In my case, employees of companies usually, um, and then there'll be more interest and more adoption. I mean, at least that's what I hope.
So would you say most of the POCs that you see right now are more hype driven than use case or useful driven?
I don't know if I go that far. I've certainly seen some very good POCs with good intentions. It's incorporating it into the company. And often there's enablers. So, for example, if you like, one of the ones I often see is people make a chat bot, right? Which is a really good thing to do. And you want to eventually have that answer all of your questions for your employees or for your customers or both. But here's the thing: if your data isn't good, if your data isn't available, if your data is not well secured, so you either have to give people the chatbot too much data, and it might tell you things like how much people earn, or things like that, or because you know it's not super secured, you've limited it to a very small subset, so it can only answer certain questions. Then the usefulness becomes less great, and I find that POC the adoption doesn't take off. Now that's not a fault of AI or any persons or anything. It comes down to the age old problem of, do we have the right data? Is the data quality? Is the data secure to the right level? That's a harder problem to solve. Ironically, AI can start to help categorize and solve data problems as far as figuring out what should or shouldn't be permission, but then you have to give it permission to go through your data to do that. So there's a lot of things to consider there, but that's what I'm seeing. I think a lot of POCs are well intended, but then like with any POC, to make it enterprise ready, that you're not exposing yourself to undue risk and so on and so forth, that's usually a lot more work. And it's not the fun work of getting together in a room for a couple of weeks and batching out an AI with something like Bedrock and AWS. It's like the hard work of categorizing your data, right? No one likes to do that. Well, there's a few of us, but most of us don't like to do that. And yet it's usually a necessary enabler to make that POC become truly useful for everybody.
And do you think this data cleaning and data access uh, is something that should be done by the company itself, or do you think it's more it should be something that the vendor should be providing as well as a part of the offering?
That's a great question. A lot of enterprise content management or ECM tools do now have capabilities to help do automated categorization, cleanup, metadata improvement of your data, because that's a human problem. You file your presentations in a presentations folder. I filed in my project folder. I have presentations and spreadsheets and documents and so on and so forth. They're both equally valid, but one of them makes it easier to do stuff than another. Things like that. I think it's going to be a bit of both, because the truth of the matter is the vendor doesn't always know your data, even if it's using very sophisticated methods, which often include AI. But you do, and you probably generally aren't going to give a vendor access to all your sensitive data to do it for you, usually as a large company, because that could lead to all kinds of challenges. So there is some accountability there. But yeah, I could also see that a vendor helping either through automation and tools or even a bit of consulting to try to enable those would probably be something that would be helpful to a lot of organizations.
And which department do you see leading in terms of asking IT to uh, put more AI in the hands of their employees? Do you see like a specific department asking you guys more for access, or is it equal throughout?
I have not seen that. I think usually that what I tend to see is often we start the POCs and the guinea pigs and the prototype and the pilot users and all these words are often IT.
Okay.
And the reason being is we're more forgiving. We're usually more technical because that's our job. And so we can put up with things, we can try things, and so on and so forth. We do occasionally get excited early users, but we don't normally go to a department. And then the challenge that then brings is we're really good at knowing what it does for IT, but often we're not, we're a very small subset of the use cases. So then we want to go and then talk to our friends in other departments and say, like, for example, you're doing customer support. So this could now look up information for you very quickly. You can ask it a question just like your user's asking you, as opposed to having to hunt through knowledge base articles or documentation or so on and so forth. And then they start to pick it up. And where I've seen so far in my career is we haven't been using it long enough that I think there's a clear winner of who or what is using it or where. But as people start to see the value of it, so say so and so in marketing starts using it to make images or to help them or so on, then they tell their friends, then the demand starts to go up. Well, David, so and so is way more productive. Can we add, licenses for their whole team? Can we do this? Can we do that? So it's almost a bit of like a grassroots word of mouth thing where as people start to use it and see the value, then they start to tell their friends, and then the growth grows. I have certainly have seen companies push it top down, like, hey, you all have it, but until someone comes and says, Sumi, this is what it does for you, is how your life's going to be better, you may or may not be keen to go in and play with it because it takes a bit of patience and trial and error to maybe get what you want.
So you talked about marketing using it for image generation, right? What are some of the other use cases you have seen where, uh, you know, um, a use case where it truly benefited the employee and boosted their productivity? Not necessarily a product that IT bought, but maybe the end user or the department themselves bought to boost their employees' productivity.
It's a good question. Ideally, in most of the companies I've worked for, because of the size and that, we don't really want companies going out and, or we don't want departments buying their own. You can, and there's certainly the ability to even build your own bots and stuff with clouds now. But we like to try to partner as an IT organization at any place I've worked because then we make sure that the right security and the guardrails and the training and all those things we talked about before are involved. Use cases that I see most commonly are usually fairly mundane and yet surprisingly time savings. Everywhere I go, a lot of the AIs now can do recording and transcripts. So I know earlier in my career, I was typing like mad, taking notes, trying to get good meeting minutes. And to be honest with you, even now, today, sometimes some of these AIs beat me. If I do it myself versus them, because they can correlate the data. And, David said this, but then 10 minutes later said this, but these are two are related. They're so fast and they're so good at it. And so the note taker job, which usually was not a particularly fun job, has now been an AI, and that applies to any department. Things like calendar management, they're not there yet in everything, but they do certain things like this or that. Research, another one we see is most of us hire, which is great. We like to do hiring, and they're very good generative AI at producing a job description for you. Now you have to tweak that obviously to your specific, but like for example, what are the qualifications of a C# developer, right? I can go back in my brain and think and go check why. It does it for me right away. But what you're going to see, I believe, as they take more, for lack of a better, training wheels off and build more integrations and APIs, is it'll do more for you. So right now it's useful, like I said, for a support organization because it can look up information quickly. You can dialogue. That's sensible. But what about when it starts to be able to do most of your Excel work? Right? What if it starts to be able to do presentations and so on? Then the finance department starts to benefit a lot more. The marketing department, the strategic types, because now instead of me having to remember how did I make the pivot table with that colorful graph, I can just say make the pivot table with the colorful graph, and it might ask me a question or two, and it's done. Now that doesn't mean that you can't still do it yourself, but if you forget how or whatever, or you need to do a lot of things over and over again, instead of having to write your own macro or all these sort of things, the AI will do that. So I guess really the answer to your question is I see everybody using it a bit differently now, but as it adds more capabilities, I think the teams and the departments that use it will broaden, and how they use it will broaden. Like again, in finance and some will be more into the Excel features, whereas maybe someone in more of a presentation or sales role might be more into the PowerPoint features. And obviously you could apply that to the Google Suite with equivalent tools with sheets and slides and stuff. It's that kind of thing.
But so, do you think in that case uh, the onus is on these departments to find the best tools, or is it on IT? Because you don't want IT to be a blocker, right? Because like you said, you don't know the use case, right? The department can tell you what they're looking for, but you doing the research and finding the best product is maybe not the best idea. So do you think with like an explosion of AI tools, who is the onus on? Is it, do you think it's on the department itself, or do you think it's on IT?
I mean, in perfect world, with any tool that's purchased of a technology, it should be a partnership. It should be a very much an equal partnership. So there should be business stakeholders and there should be IT people. Now, I've seen it more on the side of the business stakeholders say, David, we need this kind of a tool. And again, this might be AI, it might be any sort of software application, but we're not sure. We looked at these couple, and then we try to broaden the field and add on some of our IT requirements like disaster recovery and security and so on, and we make a good decision together based on our joint things. Or I've also seen the business people come and they say, David, we really want this tool, it's awesome, or my department, like we want this, and then AI would be an example of that. And then I hate to say it, sometimes IT has to then do what we call the due diligence of making sure that tool is not going to expose data and so on and so forth. However, if the tool looks good and works, the IT should not be getting in the way of that. Now, to your point though, because it's changing so quickly, and this is the challenge for us in IT, we don't want to be the blockers, but we do still have to do those due diligences. We can't have the like 6 month, year and a half review period, because then we are slowing the business down. We have to make a decision quickly. We have to either say it's not going to work because it's insecure, or there's this or that, or we can't support it, or it's too changing or whatever, and have that difficult conversation up front. Or we have to say, you know what, on the surface it seems good, let's go with it. And then again, because AI is constantly evolving, we probably should be, both us and the business people, monitoring it. Did something change versus last time that may make it better for more people, or maybe it's a little worse, or it's more insecure, so on and so forth. Again, you hope that it's always getting better.
Yeah.
But sometimes, as you know, when you roll out new features on anything, something might break and there could be some consequences. I think that's normal, but we can't really be negligent, because again, it's all changing so fast. Any tool you buy will do different things a year from now than it's doing today, which is good, but that then means you have to make sure that all the training and security and all those things, considerations, have to keep happening. So it's a challenging time, but it's also, again, because of all the features it provides and the benefits, it's a good challenge.
And then in terms of products, is it easier to buy a Copilot that maybe serves all the departments at once? Or do you think the future is each department having its own Copilot?
That's a great question. I would I would say it's going to depend on your use cases. So first of all, a true technology company might actually build their own AI, right? You might get right into the drivers and the C code and the PyTorch frameworks, the tensors and all that sort of stuff, because it makes sense to you. You want the headset to have its own AI, and you got limitations and so on of the hardware and so on, right? Then you're going to have some companies who want, for various reasons, to build an AI on a platform. So they'll use something like AWS's Bedrock. All the clouds have their own versions, and they'll build on top of a basic LLM and so that sort of stuff. Most of those are still going to be more or less technology companies in various fields, serving various fields. Once you get into more like financial institutions, healthcare, a lot of the businesses, that their business is not technology. They use it because they need it to stay competitive, or maybe even to get a competitive advantage, but they don't want to build it, right? So they might still go and build on on a platform, but a lot of us will then look at a tool out there. Ideally, one we can customize, train to our own language, make sure it can access our proper data for both our employees and our customers, those that use it. But we'll go there. So then that gets into your question space. In my experience, it's usually easier for people to share a tool and share their learnings. So you probably would get efficiency, especially in a larger organization, if you all did use one tool, like a Copilot in your example. However, sometimes that tool, because it's designed to be good for everybody, isn't super great in certain niches. Maybe it isn't the best thing for marketing, for example. And I could see them asking for their own tool. Obviously, it's not necessarily ideal to support a whole lot of tools of the same kind of thing at any company doing enterprise IT. So it becomes a bit of a trade-off. I would guess, though, just from how I see most people working, in my example earlier with the DVDs and such, is that probably you'll get more benefit and the user will be more happy if we all share a platform, because they can learn from each other, they can share this and that. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some special use cases, like someone needs to do actuarial computing or something, and they're like, none of this software meets our needs, and they will end up with their own fit for purpose AI.
And earlier you mentioned about building versus buying, right? Obviously, for technology companies, they would always want to build first. That's just in their DNA. But most of Fortune 500 is not technology companies, right? So where do you think they should be building? What are some of the tools you think they should be building instead of buying?
That's a great question. I think it does depend on each company, but I tend to look at it from the perspective, and this is for any tool, of, is there good stuff on the market that meets your needs, that's affordable? If all three of those are met, you probably want to buy, especially if the investment of building your own and maintaining it is high. So the example I always use is, most of us aren't going to go build our own enterprise resource planning software. We're not going to build our own ITSM software like a ServiceNow or something. There's hundreds of people are required for years of effort to get to the point. It just makes sense to buy it. If there's nothing good out there, you might still buy it. Or if it gives you a competitive advantage, like you want to have a much better mobile or web experience or something like that, you might buy it. And I would argue that AI will become table stakes in the same way that, like, for me, it would be weird now for a business not to have a website. It just is a bit, right?
Yeah.
1990s, that wasn't weird at all. But now I can foresee that someone's going to go to every financial institution, every healthcare company, and want to interact possibly with an AI via their website, via their mobile app, whatever they have. So then it starts to become interesting. You could always buy one. You could always buy one. But can you buy one that you can customize to give you an advantage? Can I somehow buy some sort of AI platform or technology or application or what have you that I can make mine better than my competitors? And sometimes in that case, if you're all buying the exact same one, that's hard to do. You might have to backwards integrate a bit and actually go down a level and build a bit more on top of that to give your users more experience. Again, this is my theory, my conjecture, but having seen that with other applications and technologies, that's what I could see is some companies, even though it's not their business, they might invest a little more in building parts of the AI or stuff to provide something that they are not getting out of the box, or that they want to do better than their competitor.
That makes sense. And I guess since things are moving so fast and you're making a lot of buying versus building decisions, in terms of adopting an AI tool, what is the biggest mistake you have seen a company make? It doesn't even have to be in the LLM era, even pre-LLM era, right? What's the biggest mistake you have seen a company make when in terms of adopting an AI tool?
That's a great question. If I'm really honest, it's the same mistake that I think I see in adopting almost any tool. It comes back to your POC question. It isn't its benefits aren't sold. It isn't pushed down to people in a way that they start using it. And if I use a really good example, training. Everybody always says training, but training, and it may not be classroom training, especially with AI, because it's changing so quickly. You might have to create a forum in something like Microsoft Teams or Slack or something, where David comes and says, hey guys, I found out that it'll manage my calendar to do this. Oh, but it won't do this. And 6 or 10 other people are interested in that. They say, well, David, if you did this, it would manage your calendar better. So there's a dialogue and interaction. And then again, as it starts to show value, more and more people use it. Now, as leaders, if you get enough executives, they could say from now on, you have to use this tool. But if people want to use it, it tends to be more of an uptake. So that's what I usually see. Is I can give examples of security or specifics, but realistically, normally when we roll out a tool and it doesn't earn its ROI, it doesn't impress people, it's usually because people are not like, oh, I see why this is really valuable, I'm going to use it to get the return on investment. If I'm paying a license fee anyways, the more I use it, the better the return on that investment. But if I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's hard to use, it doesn't do much, I don't have time, all these, and that might be valid reasons, but if enough of us don't use it, then it sits there, and it may end up getting canceled. We might go, well, geez, we're spending a fortune on such and such a tool, let's just save that money. And maybe that's still the right decision, but often I find it's tragic because all the work and hours that went into implementing it, and you try to kick it off, but until you get people to use it, that's that side. And then the other side of that is, if it's not fully working to your users, and this is often on us in IT, why? Why don't they want to use it? We got to ask those hard questions. And often it, again, is about features or training or compatibility. Some of it we can fix ourselves, but if we buy a tool, some of it's going back to the vendor and saying, David wanted to make this graph in his Excel file, and it told him how, but it can't make it. It told him he couldn't make it. It took him a couple questions. That happened to me. And so, can you make it do this, vendor, right? And if the vendor's responsive and stuff, that might change things. But if we in IT are like, well, we roll it out once, it does what it does, then odds are we don't get that feedback and make the time out of our busy schedules to do that, then it's not going to get better, and it may even get worse if it's got problems, people badmouth it. So, and again, that's not even about AI, that's any tool in general, but I see with AI it's more likely because some people know how to, what they call it, prompt engineering. Some people know how to talk with the AI, how to do stuff. Some people don't. It's not necessarily natural. So then it becomes, how do you get people to get the benefits out of it, if that makes sense?
That makes sense. Then is it IT's job to teach the end user?
I think people are looking to IT to do it. I don't think it has to be IT. I've seen some very impressive work from people that you wouldn't think, like in business continuity, which is more of a business type function, building chatbots to take things from incident chats and summarize them to send out emails to people and so on and so forth. What I find is interesting is the type of person who tends to do well with the generative AI, with the chat, tends to be creative and patient and a little curious and clear and a bit analytical, which describes most developers, to be honest. So people are worried about losing their job. You might not write as much code, but I don't think that's necessarily the bad thing. Those of us of a certain age, we played a video game called Zork, and there was a few of them back in the 1980s, and they were text-based video games. Now they didn't have AI, there's no internet, but it did have a bit of a translation engine. David said these two or three words were said by David, then they were the same word. There's a little bit of logic there, and it would tell you back. That's what AI is like for a lot of us today. Only it can do way more, and it's. I played those games, so I get the idea that I'm going to have to say, what are my options here? And it'll tell me stuff back. Oh, there's a sword hidden that'll help me do the quest. Well, in the same way, I say, hey, can you do this for me, AI? It'll get back. Not everybody's going to want to invest that kind of time. Not everybody has that mindset. So then it might actually be less of a chat bot type experience that we end up coming up with to make it more. It might be more of a here are three options, and then the AI will go off and work for 5 minutes. Yeah. And then most people are like, perfect, that's what I want. I want option two because I'm a busy person. I don't want to chat. I just want option two. So does that have to be on us on IT? No, but we often tend to manage those vendor relationships if it was a vendor that was making it, or the build on top of it to provide those three option buttons. So I do see IT playing a role in it, and I think that's probably a good thing.
Okay, and you also, you just mentioned about possibly losing jobs to AI, right? And let me ask you a question. In IT, in 2 years, what jobs do you think will be mostly gone in the IT department?
I don't know if I'd say mostly gone. I would say decreased.
Okay.
And what I mean is computers generally aren't as flexible as people,
Yeah.
even with AI now. So there's often a need to do certain things, but there might be a need to do less of it manually. So, for example, if we can make it so that I can give, instead of needing an executive assistant, which I'd love to have, I can give specific instructions to a back-end agentic AI that sits and runs and manages my calendar for me without me having to talk to it every time, because at that point I might as well do it myself. Then our executive assistants will not need to do calendar management, which is a huge, huge part of their time. So say one of them retires, maybe we don't need as many of them. And that's not to knock executives, they do a ton of other things that's valuable, please understand. But there might not be as much need of that. In the traditional days, which was even 5 years ago, when we had a lot of software that we had to write ourselves, because again, we couldn't buy a solution, we had a large team of developers, right? And then we had a large team of testers, and we had a lot of oversight and so on and so forth. Well, now I can sit and, as things like GitHub Copilot and so on come in, I can sit and say, give me the path operations, make me an API and so on and so forth, give me this and that, and it'll go out and it'll fill in most of the snippets of code. Now, I personally believe our developers ought to be able to read the code, basically do a code review for the AI, make sure it actually did what it's supposed to. I think there's still some onus on us. But that 6 hours of me sitting and typing is now done in 30 seconds in a lot of cases, especially as it gets better at knowing what I'm asking for and so on and so forth. So that'll be there. Now, what that'll mean is maybe we'll need less developers, but it'll also change how it thinks. If you're one of those, for lack of a better word, tactile coders who hacks their way through, who just tries stuff until it works, AI may not work well for you because you're not yourself able to describe how you're going to do it. If you're a rusty old IT director or often a business systems analyst, a BSA, or someone who's very good at articulating requirements, you're probably going to actually be a really good coder. And in the sense that the AI will write the code because you'll be able to describe it very well, right? So it'll possibly change a little bit the playing field of who does and what. Will it possibly decrease some jobs in those couple of areas, development and executive assistance? Yes, I could see that. I could see that, but I look at it more as it would also free up a lot more time for us to do the design and the thinking and so on and so forth, as opposed to the routine and mundane. I would say when my backlog is 6 years long, and honestly, in some cases it is. Now it becomes 2 years long because my people can do the trickier parts, the design parts, the talking to the users, and so on and so forth. And then the code can go pound that out in a couple hours as opposed to a couple of weeks each time. So the sprint doesn't have to be, 10 story points and it takes us 2 weeks. It might be 50 story points, it takes us 3 days because the AI is doing all the heavy lifting. It's writing the test cases, it's doing this, it's doing that. Again, it's a conjecture. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm predicting.
Okay, and let's just, keep dipping into that conjecture. David, you have to finish this sentence for me. In 5 years, the IT team will?
Oh, it'll it'll work differently. And again, to my earlier comments, we're not entirely sure how, but I'm hoping that AI will take away a lot of the drudgery. For example, anybody who's ever dealt with an IT incident and you've had to troubleshoot that sucker for days and days or hours and hours,
Yeah.
when you get proper AI operations and stuff in place, now again, your data's got to be good and your stuff has to be connected and there's security risks. There are challenges that, but if we do it right, it'll be, David, this is broke. Yeah, I already know. The AI's told me and it's figured out it's server 2, but we're just trying to replace its drive on bay 3. Wow, David, that's great. How'd you know that? Oh, the AI told me.
Yeah.
Right? Or guys, we designed this really great thing in the code. Put it in Copilot. Let's get the code out and then have Copilot unit test it for us. But then let's get some users to test it on Friday. Oh, they're busy. It's gonna have to be Monday. Okay. As opposed to, hey guys, it's gonna take us 6 weeks to code this. So hopefully in the week 7 you're not all on vacation, so you could do some end user testing just to be safe, you know. And then, well, when we saw RPA bosses, they'll do some of the end user testing for us too. Oh, even better, right? So it's going to change some of that, and I'm hoping, and I think a lot of our leaders are hoping. Back to on your first questions, that'll let us IT people do what I think we probably should be doing more, is actually talking to our users. Business people and users, whatever.
Yeah.
I know some of us don't like doing that. We're maybe a little introverted, but it can be done through chat. But actually spending the time talking to our users, because we're not fighting fires for as long. We're not spending as much time on drudgery and coding and stuff. And we can have honest conversations and say, well, what is it you need? Let me help you understand that. Now, the AI might be able to do that too in time, but it's still, somebody has to have a conversation with a person about what they need to start designing a solution. But we'll have more time for that as opposed to David's managing his calendar. David's doing this and that and drudgery. So I'm hoping that we'll actually be having a nicer life 5 years from now. But to answer your question, it will be changing how we work.